The Zags have not lost a season opener since 2003, and that streak will continue now that we know Gonzaga's first opponent of the season.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Lots to get to today, folks. Rivals updated their 2026 class rankings, and that includes a huge climb for one of Gonzaga's priority targets. Plus, could Scott Drew and Baylor be ducking the Zags after last year's 38-point massacre? We're going to talk about that after we start the show with the latest scheduling update for Gonzaga. Their non-conference schedule not quite complete, but we do know who they will open the season up against, as we found out via Texas Southern's schedule, their non-conference reveal. It feels like that's how we find out most of Gonzaga's schedule throughout the offseason, is because the other team has revealed the schedule. Gonzaga, often one of the very last schools at the Division I level to reveal their schedule, their non-conference schedule, I should say. And Texas Southern on Monday revealed their non-conference schedule and had Gonzaga listed as their first game of the season. This game will take place on Monday, November 3rd. That is the first official day of the season, so we know Gonzaga will not have any actual games prior to that. They will likely have one or two exhibition games or secret scrimmages or some kind of preseason game prior to that game, but that will be their first game of the season. Again, Monday, November 3rd. It will be at the Kennel, the Gonzaga's home court. So they will play 3 straight games in Spokane, most likely to start the season, as they're taking on Oklahoma on November 8th and then Creighton on November 11th. That game against Oklahoma will be at the Spokane Arena, and that game against Creighton will be at home at the Kennel as well. Game time and TV information is to be determined for this game against Texas Southern. We probably will not find that out until probably a month-ish from now, if not longer than that. Whenever Gonzaga does reveal their full schedule, we'll probably have a sense of when the games will be, but TV information might be a little bit longer than that until that gets completely fleshed out and finalized as well. This is Gonzaga's third known home game, and by home game, I mean at the Kennel of the season. Of course, Creighton being one of the other ones, and then Campbell, who Gonzaga is playing in December. There have been rumors of a few other games that are not quite finalized yet, but Gonzaga will have more than 3 home games in the non-conference portion of the regular season. I expect any additional games that get added outside of Baylor, which we'll talk about in the second segment. I think any other games that are going to get added to the schedule will likely be at the Kennel. Usually Gonzaga has 4 or 5 non-conference games at home. Obviously, the game at the arena is close. It's not an official home game, but it certainly counts as being at least in the vicinity of being a home game for Gonzaga. So we'll see who else kind of gets added. We'll talk a bit more about that in the second segment, but a bit more on Texas Southern. The Zags have faced Texas Southern 5 times. And they've won every single one of the games, and none of them have been close. It's been 5-0 in the I think since 2014 is when they first scheduled them. So they've played them 5 times in the last 11 or so seasons. So pretty much every other year or so, they throw Texas Southern on the schedule. Every game has been by 28 or more points. So there's never been a particularly close game between these two programs. The last time was in 2019, and in that game, Gonzaga won 101-62. And that's typically what the score of these types of games look like. Texas Southern, a member of the SWAC conference, a conference typically one of the worst performing conferences in college basketball at the D1 level year over year. It's a conference made primarily of HBCUs, historically black colleges, and universities. It's a very low resource conference. And one of the things that Texas Southern is pretty known for, and not just them, Gonzaga plays other SWAC teams, Alcorn State, Mississippi Valley State are a few that come to mind that Gonzaga's played recently. But one of the things that these schools in the SWAC typically do is they schedule very competitive non-conference schedules. And basically they are allowing good programs to buy them 4 games. So Gonzaga is sending money to Texas Southern in order to have them come out to Spokane and lose a basketball game. That's effectively what's happening here. I don't know specific number has been revealed. Usually it's like 500,000, 750,000, something like that. It's why they're called bye games. It's not bye, BYE, as in like, oh, it's a bye week because they're not a good team. It's bye, BUY, as in we are giving you money to come to our home court and lose a basketball game. Obviously, the team's not trying to lose, and there are instances of bye games being lost. I think notably in football, Appalachian State beating Michigan was, I think, one of the most kind of biggest notorious bye games in college athletics. It happens in basketball every single year. A few years ago, James Madison beat Michigan State on like the second day of the season. That James Madison team ended up being very good, but that was a bye game for Michigan State. Tom Izzo and the Spartans paid that team to come to their arena, and then they lost that basketball game. Texas Southern is like the kind of pinnacle for this on the men's basketball side of things. A few years ago, their schedule with like every single non-conference game basically was a true road game against a Power 4 or Power 5 team. Then they were just getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars total to just lose a whole crap load of basketball games early in the season. We saw that even this year as they released their non-conference schedule. It's not quite as dramatic as it's been in previous years for Texas Southern, but they're playing at Gonzaga, they're playing at Texas A&M, they're playing at Vanderbilt, at Minnesota, and at NC State. So it's not as dramatic, but that's still 5 true road games against power conference teams. Again, it's not as dramatic because outside of Gonzaga, none of those teams are guaranteed to be ranked this year. I think NC State will probably sneak in under new coach Will Wade. I think Texas A&M under new coach Bucky McMillan could do so as well. 3 of these 4 teams have new head coaches this year, which is probably not a coincidence in trying to schedule some maybe easier games as they kind of get acclimated to their new set and their new team and their new roster and everything. So not a huge shock. Last year, Texas Southern went 15-17. They went 12-6 in the SWAC, finished 5th. They were 3-10 in the non-con. 9 of those 10 losses were true road games. Again, not a surprise. This is what they do year in and year out. Going to be a very, very new look team for Coach Jones and Texas Southern. They were losing 6 of their 7 leading scorers. The only one returning is Colby Granger, who averaged about 7 points and 4.5 boards per game last year. They also return a pair of 5-point-per-game scorers in Kellen Farouk and Jalen Jackson Posey. Add a couple of transfers, Troy Hupstead and Josh Akpovwa. Hupstead averaged 13.5 points and 8.5 boards at Maryland Eastern Shore 2 years ago, and then Akpova averaged about 4 points and 2 boards in 38 career games at Incarnate Word. The Zags have not lost a season opener in over 20 years. The last time Gonzaga started a season 0-1 was 2003 when they opened the season against St. Joe's. Now losing to St. Joe's would not be great for Gonzaga. In 2003, Gonzaga was not really quite yet Gonzaga, and St. Joe's was one of the best programs in the entire sport. And even still, Gonzaga only lost that game 73-66. By the way, it was in New York, so playing St. Joe's, which is based in Philadelphia or in that area, and still nearly beating them when that was a great St. Joe's team in New York. Not exactly a terrible result for the Zags. That was a coaches versus cancer game as well. Gonzaga, obviously, they don't typically play super competitive games in the first game of the season, so it's not exactly surprising that they've won 21 of these first games in a row. It does include Baylor last year. We'll talk about that in a second as they blasted Baylor by 38 points. That was the second most notable season opener we've seen Gonzaga play in recent years. The other one was Kansas, who Gonzaga opened against in 2020 as part of that 2020-21 season, where they did not lose until they played Baylor in the national championship game. That game against Kansas, by the way, I don't remember. Last year's was probably the second most exciting start to a season that we have seen for Gonzaga, just into the sense of typically they play teams like Eastern Washington or North Florida a few years ago, or like Sacramento State. Like they typically don't play super competitive games to start the season. So when they beat, the first game of the season, they win by 15, 20, 25, 30, whatever, it doesn't feel that exciting. But the 38-point win over Baylor was incredible, even if the rest of the season kind of never really hit that peak. And then that win over Kansas was extraordinary. Jalen Suggs was instantly proved how great he truly was. And that team, of course, continued to ascend all the way until Jalen Suggs' 37-footer against UCLA, which was the pinnacle of the season. And then we know what happened after that, and we don't need to get all the way into it. Gonzaga did open the season against Texas Southern once in the 2017-18 season, won that game by 32, I think, or 33 points. So we'll see if Gonzaga has another 30-ish point victory in them for their first game of the season this year, November 3rd, 2025, at the McCarthy Athletic Center. Well, like we said, Gonzaga's non-con, it's nearly finalized. And one game that we have yet to see on the schedule is the Baylor Bears. Could Scott Drew be ducking the Zags after that 38-point massacre last year? We're going to talk about that coming up in just a second. But first, folks, the summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf out on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game just a little bit more exciting. And you're already following the action, so why not make it more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game action while your friends are out getting sunburned on the beach. You can use FanDuel to track your favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like appointment viewing. So whether you're placing a same game parlay or watching a bet right out into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you're always part of the action. If you're feeling a little spicy coming into the season, Graham Ike is Gonzaga's leader in the Wooden Award odds at plus 5,000. If you think it's been 20 years since the Zags had a Wooden Award winner, the time is now. Like I said, you can get a little spicy with Graham Ike at plus 5,000. If you want to get real spicy, Tyon Grant Foster's at plus 12,000. If you think he's not only going to get eligible, but have a monster season in Spokane, might be worth tossing a little bit of money down. And a reminder, if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet $5 and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we're still talking non-conference scheduling for Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs after the reveal earlier in the week that Gonzaga will open up the season taking on Texas Southern at home. We now officially know 10 of Gonzaga's 13 non-conference games. And I say that officially because there are 2 other games that we may know, one that has been discussed, that has been floated around but has not been finalized by either team. The other one, of course, being Baylor. So if those 2 games are true, then we'll have 12 of the 13 non-conference games done and dusted. But as of right now, we only know 10 for sure. I'm going to go through them here quickly, and then we'll talk about what's left on this schedule. We know Gonzaga is opening the season against Texas Southern on November 3rd. We know 5 days later they are taking on Porter Moser and Oklahoma. That game will be at the Spokane Arena. It is the first of a home-and-home series, so Gonzaga will take on Oklahoma in Oklahoma next year. I am curious if that game will be on Oklahoma's home floor, if it'll be somewhere else in Oklahoma, because Gonzaga is playing them at the arena. We'll see what ends up happening there, but either way, happy to have Oklahoma on the schedule, a good up-and-coming team under Coach Moser. Should be a fun early test for Gonzaga's guards, especially as Oklahoma has a very good backcourt and an experienced backcourt heading into this season. Next up, 3 days later, Gonzaga takes on Creighton. That is the first of a home-and-home series as well, and that game is expected to be at the Kennel, meaning that Gonzaga will take on Creighton on their home floor the following year as well. Again, Creighton, a team that's going under a bit of a rebuild after losing their superstar Ryan Kalkbrenner, who was there for 5 years and a huge part of Creighton's success over the last half-decade. This also means Gonzaga's first 3 games of the season, unless they add a game on like November 6th, which they could do, that would be 3 days after the opener against Texas Southern, still 2 days before that Oklahoma game. So there might be another game in early November, but if not, Gonzaga's first 3 games of the year will be in Spokane before November 14th when they take on the road to go take on Arizona State. This is the second game in a home-and-home series that started last year when Gonzaga beat Arizona State in Spokane, 88-80. Now they get to go take on the Sun Devils in Tempe. Sun Devils featuring Mo Odom, former Pacific and Pepperdine guard, and then also Marcus Adams Jr., who spent last year at CSUN, but who was committed briefly to Gonzaga out of high school as well. Next is November 17th against Southern Utah, and this is the game that is not finalized. It has been reported on social media by people who generally are correct about scheduling things, but neither Gonzaga or Southern Utah have finalized their non-conference schedules. So this game is still considered theoretical or still considered not a final part of Gonzaga's schedule. But assuming this game is happening, it would be November 17th at the Kennel. At least that has been what is reported at this point. After that, we know Gonzaga will play 3 games in Las Vegas as part of the New Players Era Festival. The first game will be November 24th against Alabama at 6:30 Pacific time. 24 hours later, Gonzaga will take on Maryland. That's regardless of whether they win or lose against Alabama. They will play Maryland in the second game. And the third game is to be determined. It depends whether they go 1-1, 2-2, 2-0, 0-2 in those first 2 games. Will determine who they play in that third game, which will be on November 26th. By the way, that's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So if you're looking at making your Thanksgiving plans, most people don't make their plans early. We do, because my wife is a nurse, and so we got to have it finalized ahead of time. There will not be a Gonzaga game on Thanksgiving. Good news or bad news, depending on how you feel about spending time with your family on that holiday. Next known game for Gonzaga, December 5th, taking on Kentucky. This game will be in Nashville at the Bridgestone Arena, the home of the NHL's Nashville Predators. Game 4 in a 6-year series between Gonzaga and Kentucky. The Zags are up 2-1 in that series. Lost last year, the first time facing Mark Pope's Kentucky team. They lost after an 18-point lead in the second half. Really tough loss at the Climate Pledge Arena. Now Zags looking for a little revenge, taking on Kentucky in Nashville. 8 days later, Gonzaga will take on UCLA at the Climate Pledge Arena, hoping to kind of rid themselves of the curse of Climate Pledge, as they have really struggled to play there. Taking on a UCLA team as part of a 2-year home and home series, Gonzaga, or neutral site series, pseudo home and home series, I should say. Gonzaga lost the first game last year to UCLA at the Intuit Dome, the home of the Los Angeles Clippers. Gonzaga taking on Campbell on December 17th at the Kennel. That is the final known non-conference game for the Zags. What we do not know is Baylor. Gonzaga, of course, hosted Baylor at the Spokane Arena last year, the first game of the season, and it was reported as part of a 3-year series where there would be 1 game in Spokane, 1 game in Waco, and then 1 neutral site game. However, at this point, Baylor has not scheduled that game with Gonzaga. Or that game has not been scheduled. I don't know who has not scheduled it. But considering what happened last year, considering that Baylor lost literally every single player, Baylor returned 0.0% of their minutes from last year's roster. Some of that was them kind of pushing a few guys out and saying, hey, we are kind of good to start over. It did not go well for us last year. They brought in some very talented players. Tunde Yusufu is one of the top freshmen in the country. Michael Ratai was a stud last year at Oregon State. If you remember, Gonzaga's lost to Oregon State. I think he had 30 in that game. He's going there. Dan Skillings was a player Gonzaga pursued in the transfer portal before he ended up going to Baylor. This is going to be a pretty good Baylor team, but I wonder if they are opting to not play Gonzaga in part because they know it's such a new look roster and they maybe want to fill their non-conference schedule with games that are a little bit easier for them to get camaraderie together, as in games that maybe are a little easier for them to win. I do know they're playing Washington. I know they're playing Louisville. Neither of those are particularly easy teams. Louisville will likely be ranked higher than Gonzaga to start the season. Washington will not, although I do think Washington has a chance to be pretty good this season. So I'm not accusing Scott Drew and Baylor of doing what a lot of other Big 12 schools do, like TCU and Iowa State and others, where they just play incredibly cupcake non-conference schedules because they know they're going to get enough quad one opportunities in the Big 12. I'm not accusing Baylor of doing that because they've never really done that historically. And I don't think Scott Drew is the kind of coach who would shy away from playing any tough games, even in a season where he had that much roster overhaul. But I do wonder if he's choosing to avoid Gonzaga in part because of that. I doubt that this would go the way of like, hey, we're just abandoning this altogether. I think if anything, it would be a 1-year gap and they would return to the series the following season when Gonzaga is joining the Pac-12. It's also possible that that we find out that this game is happening and it gets announced very soon. Like I don't have any specific information. I've heard rumblings that the Baylor game might not be happening. I'm not making this up out of thin air. It has been rumored, it has been discussed by people familiar with the situation that, hey, I think that Baylor game may not be happening, but there's nothing confirmed either way at this point. just something to keep an eye on because it's a big part of Gonzaga's schedule. And they're set regardless. Kentucky, UCLA, Creighton, Oklahoma, Arizona State, Alabama, Maryland is already a tough non-conference schedule. So you don't need Baylor for it to be a tough schedule, but you'd like to have them on there to give you some even more kind of preparation for the regular season and the NCAA tournament. So again, if Southern Utah is finalized, if Baylor is finalized, that's 12 out of 13. So there's at least one game still to be done, regardless of whether this Baylor game ends up happening. And who's that going to be? I think that's the big question. If we assume Southern Utah is a game that's happening and we assume Campbell, we know that Campbell's happening, we're still probably looking at another bye game for Gonzaga. They just don't have that many. I mean, Texas Southern and Southern Utah and Campbell are the only kind of bye games on the schedule. And again, Southern Utah is not finalized yet. So usually Gonzaga plays 4, maybe as many as 5 bye games. So I think you're still going to see more. I wouldn't expect Gonzaga's last non-conference game or last 2 non-conference games, if they do have more than one hole to fill, to be super exciting. I think the only other exciting matchups we'll find out for Gonzaga would be in an exhibition game. Like I could see them scheduling an exhibition game against like a Tennessee or an Arkansas or somebody like that, like USC last year, a team that's got some talent that would be fun to play against. But I think that the non-conference game or games that are left are going to be teams like maybe it's some local teams, Idaho, Montana, Idaho State, Montana State, somebody like that. I don't think it'll be Eastern. I don't think Mark Few and Dan Munson will play each other. I'd be very surprised if that happened. Maybe it's a Big West team. We've seen Gonzaga typically play Big West teams. They played Long Beach last year. They've played teams like CSUN and Fullerton and others in the past. I wouldn't be surprised to see somebody like that crop up. Cal Baptist, maybe somebody in that vein. Sacramento State, perhaps, maybe a Big Sky team that's not Montana or Idaho ends up on the list as well. Those are kind of where I expect it to be. A West Coast-based mediocre mid-major team is kind of where I think that Gonzaga's last game or games will end up being on the non-conference schedule. But again, I do think there will be an exciting announcement for a exhibition game. Hopefully it's either just a regular exhibition game that is on TV. Maybe you'll get not a secret scrimmage. Those are no fun because you don't get to see them actually play and see how it goes. I know Gonzaga's done those pay-per-view games in the past as well, which is a little bit irritating, but I suppose I'd rather that than them playing an NAIA or D3 school like Willamette or Eastern Oregon, where sure, it's nice to be able to watch the walk-ons and the backups get some playing time, but it doesn't really do a whole lot to help make this team better. Well, folks, switching gears in the final segment here, a high-priority recruit for the Zags jumped 40 spots in Rivals' updated 2026 class rankings. Once again, proof that Mark Few knows what he's doing out on the recruiting trail. We got more on that coming up in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. And we're closing out the show with more recruiting talk. Been a lot of recruiting on Locked On Zags the last couple of weeks as Gonzaga has been very busy extending offers to many, many players in the 2026 and 2027 recruiting classes. We have seen a renowned emphasis for the Zags on pursuing small forward athletic wing types on the recruiting trail. It's been a big push for this staff the last couple of weeks, really last couple of months on the recruiting trail. And now with On3/Rivals, and I say it that way in case you missed this news update that those two companies have merged. On3 has acquired Rivals, which means where there used to be 4 distinct recruiting ranking services, On3, Rivals, ESPN, and 247 Sports, there are now just 3, as On3 and Rivals have merged into one, leaving 247 and ESPN as the other 2. And On3/Rivals has updated their recruiting rankings for the 2026 class following the kind of end of the major AAU summer circuit. This is when a lot of players go flying up and down the recruiting rankings. What they do during their high school season obviously matters. But for a lot of players who are playing at their local high school, they're dominating, but you're not really sure. Like Davis Fogel's a great example, who's committed to Gonzaga and is joining them this upcoming season. He was great playing at Anacortes High School, but he didn't really balloon up the rankings until he started competing against other players who were perceived to be, top 100, top 150 recruits. And once it was clear he could hold his own against that caliber of talent, he shot up the rankings. So those AAU, Summer Circuit, Peach Jam, EYBL, whatever it may be, are critical for being able to evaluate these players. And now that that season is done and all we're really left with for these 2026 recruits is one more go round in their traditional high school season, it made sense for Rivals to update those rankings. We're going to list all of the players that Gonzaga has made an offer to in the 2026 class, where they are currently ranked by Rivals, where they were previously ranked. We'll talk a little bit about where Gonzaga is at with those players as well. Starting at the very top, quite literally the top, the number one player in the 2026 class remains Tyran Stokes. He has not moved. He is still the top player in that class. He still has an offer from Gonzaga. He's still reportedly going to visit Gonzaga, although the date will not be revealed because his mother indicated that last time they told people where he was going to visit, there was a bunch of people at the airport and it kind of made them uncomfortable. So we may not know when he's coming to campus, but he is still the number one player in the class. Kentucky, Louisville, major players. Would be an incredible coup for Gonzaga to land Stokes, the 6'7", 245-pound monster out of high school, but he is playing at the same high school as Dusty Stromer, and Gonzaga has been known to be connected to him for a while. Next known target for Gonzaga in 2026 is Ikenna Elozie, a point guard who fell from 17th to 29th in the class. So he didn't have a great summer, fell a little bit, still a top 30 recruit. Elozie already listed Gonzaga in his top 8. He is planning to visit all 8 of the schools on his list. That includes Gonzaga. No date has been set for his visit to Spokane, but he is the best. He is the only point guard, only guard really on Gonzaga's recruiting kind of map for the 2026 class. Next up, number 40 is Sam Funches. Funches is the player who moved 40 spots. He actually moved 41 spots to be specific. And this was kind of weird. I'm not sure what happened at Rivals. Maybe I'll see if I can contact Joe Tipton or Jamie Shaw, because Funches was like in the 30s, in the 40s, like a few months ago. And then they did an update early in the offseason and he fell all the way to 81. And now he's climbed all the way back up to 40. So I'm not sure if they just recorrected it, if there was some reason, something that happened, or if it just their evaluation changed dramatically and then changed dramatically again. That can happen. But ultimately 40 kind of feels more like where he has been in this class ranking historically. The 81 feels like more of an aberration than anything else. Funches listed Gonzaga in his top 10, is also visiting Spokane officially for Craziness in the Kennel October 3rd through 5th. Craziness will be on October 4th. He was planning to visit way back in February, but that visit did not happen because his high school team was still playing in the state playoffs in Mississippi. Funches is one of the top targets for Gonzaga, also the only center prospect that Gonzaga is pursuing in that 2026 class. Next up is all small forwards or wings, 2s, 3s. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7 more guys to talk about. Again, all of them kind of on the wing as we talked about Gonzaga's pursuit of those athletic wing types. Next up at 43 is Bo Ogden. He moved up 1 spot from 44th. Ogden somewhat surprisingly listed Gonzaga in his top 6 a few weeks ago, despite there not really being a lot of press about Gonzaga being interested in Ogden. So that was a bit surprising. We don't know as of now if Ogden is planning to visit Gonzaga, how interested he actually is, if he just listed them for clout type reasons. But Ogden is a very, very, very good 3-point shooter. And considering Gonzaga's struggles in that area recently, certainly wouldn't be a bad player to pick up a commitment from. Next up, 1 spot lower is Luca Foster, who's 44th in the class after being 33rd the last time these rankings were updated. After that, at 54, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of Gonzaga's offers in 2026 are top 50 prospects, and then you have 5 more who are outside the top 50, albeit barely in the case of Cameron Holmes. Cameron Holmes is 54th. He was 26th the last time these were updated, so struggled down the stretch in that summer circuit and fell down in the rankings. He is the younger brother of Denver Nuggets forward Tyran Holmes, who was an All-American at Dayton during his collegiate career. Very, very athletic, 3-4 hybrid type wing. Next up is Anthony Felici, who is 63rd in the 2026 class. He was 51st last time these rankings were done, another athletic wing type. Next up is Ethan Harris. And I mentioned that Sam Funches was the big riser. Not nearly the biggest riser. Not nearly the biggest riser. Ethan Harris from Camas, Washington, is 65th in On3's updated class rankings. Previously, Ethan Harris was 239th. That is a monster climb. And this is the example. This is the Davis Fogel example. A player who was very productive at Camas High School. Camas High School plays in a decently competitive basketball league in the Southwest Washington area. And it's Camas just east of Vancouver, Washington. So it's not like he was playing the same competition as like Fogel at Anacortes High School, which is much lower level. But he still wasn't getting a lot of national attention for his numbers at Camas High School. But then this summer, when he started competing against other players, who were more highly regarded and played well against them, he shot up the rankings, rocketed up the rankings. From 239 to 65 is unreal. Harris has attention from a lot of other local programs, including Gonzaga, Washington in the mix, a few others. I think Washington State and Oregon State are in the mix here as well. Really fun to see a player with local ties balloon up that much in the rankings. Next up is 81st overall is small forward Hurley Brutus, another really good three-point shooter in this class. Brutus was 77th in the last ranking, so only a small change for him. And then last is J. Rob Croy, one of Gonzaga's more recent offers. I think they offered him about 2 weeks ago. Croy was 172nd last time On3 updated their rankings, and he climbed up 40-plus spots to 137th in this class. Folks, that's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. We have so much more recruiting stuff coming your way. As we've mentioned a few times already, the 2026 class is moving pretty slow in terms of actually making commitments and revealing top 10 lists and taking visits. So we've talked about it a lot because there hasn't been a lot of actual real movement, but that's starting to change. We're going to see more top lists come out. We're going to see these visits happen, and we're going to have more updates on what this means for Gonzaga's future coming up in future episodes. As a reminder, the show is down to 3 episodes per week, so this will be my final episode this week, but I'll be back next week. Got a fun interview lined up for you all. We'll have more updates on recruiting, hopefully get some updates on Tyran Grant Foster, Mario St-Superi, and others as the Zags start to get ready for the season coming up. Thanks again, folks, for listening. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And, of course, as always, go Zags.